Malcolm.
My Lords, I welcome the noble lady, Lady Fulbrook, and I hope she enjoys her time in the House as much as I do. And I listened with great interest to the noble Lord the Minister in his delivering in his usual emollient way all these incredibly nasty pieces of legislation that the government's bringing in. And although I'm going to try to stay coherent as I speak, I'm actually spitting with fury, so if that could be taken into account. What we have to understand is there's a lot of bills in this Queen's speech, and given that this is the third Prime Minister's speech in 2 years, and most of the legislation that he's announced hasn't actually happened, and sometimes is on its third or fourth or even fifth iteration, I'm just staggered that there are so many bills in the speech. And again, the really important stuff like the Environment Bill gets put off again and again, which is going to be very embarrassing when we come to COP26. But then, of course, the government always finds time for the really nasty bits of legislation, like the Spy Cops Bill and the Overseas Operations Bill. And I do worry about this trend that the government has, and that's why I've chosen to speak today in this particular debate on the topics of crime and justice and home affairs, because I think this is where the government does some of its worst work. Much of the proposed legislation is actually designed to fight political proxy wars and not try to actually improve people's lives and create a better future, which I think is probably what the government's job is. For example, the Electoral Integrity Bill is an excuse to make it harder for people to vote, and particular people, not just any old people, particular people harder to vote, while giving the Conservative Party more power in an attempt to extend the life of this government for, well, let's say decades, possibly. And the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Bill seeks to put financial penalties on universities and student unions for not wanting to listen to speakers with fundamentally stupid ideas. I just don't understand it. And it gets a bit confusing as well when the government, apparently so concerned about free speech, is also bringing a bill designed to criminalise and ban free speech and the right to protest, because protest is free speech. So we're being asked to crack down on free speech in one bill, but also force people to listen to speakers that they fundamentally disagree with in another. It will be very interesting to see over time just how this plays out in court, how these two pieces of legislation interact. And next up on the nasty list is the government's plans to make it harder for people to claim asylum and refuge. This is horrendous. It's plain cruel. At a time of such global instability, much of which we've caused, especially as global migration will increase, we are going to carry on trashing the planet, we are going to make huge areas uninhabitable, and as we continue to sell weapons to tyrant regimes and war criminals, there will be more political instability in all sorts of countries. We are responsible for a huge number of the people who come to this country seeking refuge, and we should accept that and accept it's our duty to make them welcome. There are some important pieces of legislation that are tucked in there, but I sort of feel those are the ones that are going to fall through the cracks and probably that we won't actually get around to, which of course is very distressing because it will be the most regressive laws that actually come through and that the government supports. And I think this is really appealing to the darkest parts of human nature. And it is not good for our collective psyche, not just here in the House, but in the wider society. So I can promise you strong and relentless opposition. Good woman.